In this screencast, we're going to consider good programming practices, focusing on stylistic considerations. So one guideline to keep in mind when you write MATLAB programs is that you should always write programs for people, not for computers. And so you should write clear code, clear to you or clear to other people, and that it should remain clear even when some time elapses. If you look at your code a month from now, you should still be able to understand what the code is doing. So we're going to focus on three very simple strategies to improve the clarity of your code. One is to comment your code, one is to indent your code, and the third is to make sure that your naming conventions, that they are consistent, that they are distinctive, and that your variable names are meaningful. So let's look at this example script. This is the guessing game that we have discussed in a previous screencast. The computer draws a random number between 1 and n, and the user tries to guess this random number. So first of all, note the use of comments. So comments start with a percentage character, and comments can precede the line that they are referring to. So here I'm explaining in this line what is happening in the next line. But comments can also be placed on the same line. So here I have a declaration of a variable I equals 0, and then I explain here on the same line that what this is doing is that I'm initializing a counter for the guess. So there is a comment in terms of a single percentage character, and then there's a comment in terms of a double percentage character. A double percentage character is used to break up the code into different sections. So note that if I place my cursor here on these lines, these are all yellow highlighted, and then now if I place my cursor on these lines, I jump to the next section. A convention is that when you break up your code into various sections, and each section does a separate thing, use this main comment here that follows the double percentage character combination. You explain what that section is doing. And then you use the single percentage characters to explain basically what each individual line is doing. The use of sections is very useful if you want to test individual sections of your code. So if you highlight a particular section in your code, you can press this button, Run Section, and then you let MATLAB run only that section of the code. And this is very useful if you want to test some or work on some bug that appears in one part of your code and you don't want to rerun all the other sections of your code. Now comments also come in very handy if you want to disable parts of your code. For example, if we don't want to save the results at the end of the script, we can highlight the lines, and now we can click this button here. This becomes just a comment line, so MATLAB will no longer execute these lines. If we want to enable these lines again, we can highlight them again, and now you can press this button to uncomment these lines. You can also use the keyboard shortcuts Control R and Control T to add comments or to turn lines into comments or to uncomment lines. Another way to clarify your code is to use indentation. Note that these lines are indented here to indicate that they're part of this while loop. Now indentation is not required. For example, I can remove the spaces here and I still have a valid MATLAB program. However, this would be somewhat more difficult to read and understand. If you want MATLAB to provide standard indentation to your code, you can highlight the lines that you want to be automatically indented and then press this indent button, or you can use the keyboard shortcut Control and the I key simultaneously. And then you apply the standard MATLAB indentation, which will definitely improve the readability of your code. Now, finally, to improve readability, you should use variable names that are meaningful. So here in this code, I've tried to pick variable names that would be meaningful, not only to myself, but to other people that could use this particular code. There are a number of variable naming conventions, and I won't advocate one particular style of naming your variables. But whatever style you use, be consistent. So one style is to use all lowercase, as indicated for these two variables. Another is to use uppercase letters for the start of some new word in your overall term, like true number or quality of life. And finally, you can try to improve readability by separating the different words in your term by underscores. Now, MATLAB has one very handy tool to change variable names and to do this across all the repetitions of variables in your code. So suppose I want to rename true number to something else. So I want to change style here. I'm going to capitalize this N. And now, as MATLAB already indicates to you, you can use the Shift plus Enter key to rename all these instances of that variable so that MATLAB will not complain later that it does not recognize a variable later in the code. Now, similarly, I could do this with other parts of my code. For example, this one over here, if I want to be consistent, I have to change that one. And now I've done all my code. Now, finally, one useful convention is to use the prefix n for variables that represent the number of objects. If you have the number of trials in your code, you can use n trials as your variable name, or you have a number of documents as a variable. Again, you can use n documents to indicate that quantity.